Friends Between Ages, A Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time fanfiction by Inkrose. Master Sword in hand, Link dealt the final blow to Phantom Ganon, the sword digging into the Phantom's skull. The body of the beastly creature convulsed, eerie energy sparking in erratic patterns around it, hovering silently as an uncanny light surrounded it. Link's eyes narrowed as a deep and booming, yet oddly familiar voice echoed through the chamber.
"Hey kid, you did quite well. It looks like you may be gaining some slight skill," boomed the voice of Ganondorf.
The body began to dissolve. An otherworldly-looking purple portal appeared in the middle of the room, and the Phantom's remains sunk into it.
"But you have only defeated my Phantom. When you fight the real me, it won't be so easy."
The Phantom's arms raised, clutching its head in pain as a blue flame consumed what was left of it.
"What a worthless creation that ghost was. I will banish it to the gap between dimensions."
Ganondorf's voice faded, as his presence began to leave the room. The air was thick and full of dust. It was very quiet. Link sheathed the sword, his gaze traveling around the area. His previously angry expression melted into one of concern.
"Saria?"
he called out softly. Navi zoomed across the chamber, searching for any sign of the Kokiri. A bright light flashed before Link. He stumbled back in surprise. A small girl appeared before him in the center of the floor. She appeared unconscious, lying limply on the ground. A green fairy rested on her head. Link's eyes widened. He rushed towards her. "Saria!" he cried, kneeling beside the girl and gingerly touching her shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, and she gasped, then bolted upright, sending Link reeling back. "Who are you?" she cried, her eyes wide with fear. She gazed at Link. The green fairy hid behind her shoulder. Link was silent for a moment, his mouth open in surprise. It seemed like it had been forever since he had last seen Saria. It was almost unbelievable that he was laying eyes on his best friend again. "Saria, it's me," he said, smiling in excitement. He reached out for her, wanting to hug her for the first time in ages. She shrunk back from his arm, giving a small cry. Link's hand dropped, his smile fading.
Even you don't recognize me," he whispered.
Her terrified eyes seemed to bore into his soul. It hurt him greatly to see his best friend so scared of him. "It's me, Link!" he cried. He hastily pulled out the ocarina Saria had given him all those years ago and began to play a familiar tune. The cheerful song seemed to light a spark in Saria's eyes. She looked at Link in awe. "There's no way. You can't be," Saria murmured. Her body began to relax. "Link?" Link's heart rose. He lowered the ocarina, a wide grin adorning his lips. "You remember me! You really do!" He went in for a hug again, and this time Saria let him. Tears escaped from both of their eyes as they hugged. Saria wrapped her arms around Link's neck, weeping as she embraced him. "It's been so long since I've seen you," she said. Why are you all grown up? Link, what's happened to you?" Link's eyebrows knit together. He stared into space.
I'm not a Kokiri. I never was."
He looked downward. "I'm a Hylian." Saria pushed herself away from Link, her hands on his shoulders as she gazed into his eyes. "I thought you were dead." Her lip trembled. "I don't care whether you're a Hylian, a Zora, or even a Gerudo. I'm just glad you're alive and that you're here." She smiled warmly, making Link's heart light up with joy. "Though, I do wonder why you're here. Where have you been all these years, Link?" Link stood up, adjusting his belt and sheath. He wanted to avoid the question. The real reason he had been sent here was to awaken Saria. She was one of the sages, after all. But before that, he really wanted to talk with her. Maybe it would feel like old times again, if only for a moment.
"I've been asleep for the past 7 years, he mumbled. "I just woke up to find myself taller and Hyrule in ruins. I wanted to find you as soon as I could, and Mido told me you were here."
"Asleep? For 7 years?" Saria raised her eyebrows in bewilderment.
"Well, yeah. It's a long story. The point is, I'm not really a grown-up. I'm still me. I'm still the same old kid. You believe me, right?" Link asked desperately.
Of course," Saria said. She tenderly placed a hand on his cheek. "We're still friends. Friends forever." She donned a slight look. I've gotta admit, though, it's really weird seeing you so tall compared to me. Definitely the exact opposite from how you used to be, she winked.
Hey, Link exclaimed. You were never taller than me. He laughed. Besides, it's been so long, how would you even remember?
Link could hear Navi chuckling behind him. Saria's fairy did as well. Saria giggled. There are some things in life you always remember. You are one of those things.
Oh geez, Link blushed. Don't go all sappy on me now.
Saria lightly punched him in the stomach. Oh, shut it, she grinned. Now let's get out of here. You can explain more on the way. Link nodded in agreement, taking her small hand in his and beginning to lead her towards the forest temple's exit. He stopped suddenly.
Hey, he said, looking down at Saria. Remember how you always tried to ride piggyback on me?
Yeah, but you always collapsed on the ground in exhaustion after a few steps, Saria teased.
Link chose to ignore her comment. Well, as you can plainly see, I'm a lot stronger now. In fact, you could say I'm pretty buff.
He flexed his bicep for good measure. Right. I'll be the judge of that. Saria leapt onto Link's back, climbing atop his shoulders. Link struggled to balance as Saria grabbed his ears to keep from falling off. Ouch! Sorry, Saria cried. Are all Hylians like this? Your ears are kind of like handles, they're so long. Link smirked.
Yeah, thanks, I guess.
No problem, Saria winked.
Not that your ears are too much better, Link said with a smirk.
Saria simply pulled off his hat in response, dangling it above his head as Link attempted to get it back. They continued to travel through the Grim Temple, going up the lift leading to the main room. I noticed you still have the ocarina I gave you, Saria said quietly, leaning on Link's head.
Of course, Link gave a soft smile.
Could I see it?
Sure.
Link reached into a compartment on his belt and pulled out the fairy ocarina, handing it up to Saria. She examined it for a moment, then put it to her lips and began to play her favorite song. Link hummed along with the jaunty tune. His thoughts drifted back to his home in the Kokiri forest, and all of the times Saria had awoken him when he had overslept. He remembered how he and Saria had taken turns playing her ocarina while the other either danced or tried to make up lyrics to the song. A fresh wave of nostalgia washed over him with every note. Link chuckled as another thought came to his mind.
You know, it's a really lucky thing you decided to teach me how to play the ocarina. You wouldn't believe how handy that skill turned out to be.
Saria cocked her head. Really?
Yup. Turns out the magical key to the Temple of Time is a song you have to play on a special ocarina. Funny coincidence, huh?
Temple of Time?
Saria inquired. It's a place in Hyrule Castletown. It's where I got the sword.
Link motioned with his head towards the Master Sword strapped to his back behind Saria.
There's a lot we need to catch up on.
Saria brushed the hilt of the Master Sword with her fingers, giving a small gasp. This feels familiar. I think I've seen this sword before, Saria said in a wistful tone. Link's heart leapt into his throat. She was slowly beginning to awaken as a sage. He laughed nervously, brushing the topic of the Master Sword aside. He couldn't let her go so soon.
Hey, could you keep playing your song? I always loved listening to it, Link asked.
Saria nodded, smiling as she once again began playing her ocarina. The two friends entered the last room of the temple, their destination only a door away. Saria lowered her ocarina, the cheerful music coming to a halt. I'm so glad you came, Saria said. I was very scared. Link was silent. He listened to the two fairies quietly chatting with each other a few feet away.
You were one of the first things I thought about when I woke up, he said. I mean, the first thing I thought about was, what in the world happened to me and why am I suddenly so tall? But you were definitely the second thing I thought about, Link trailed off, biting his lip. It was really scary, stepping out of the temple and seeing the castle town in ruins. I was really worried about you, he said. I won't let Ganondorf get away with all that he's done. He clenched his fist.
Saria patted Link's head softly. Yeah, a lot has happened since you left. Link opened the door leading to the outside of the forest temple. He gently lowered Saria off of the side of the high platform outside the door, and then lowered himself off of it. Saria sat on the familiar tree stump beside the platform, motioning for Link to sit beside her. He did so without hesitation. Now it's time you tell me everything, said Saria, raising her eyebrows in curiosity, starting with that special ocarina you claimed you needed to get to the sword. Link didn't want to talk about what had transpired since he had last seen Saria. It was stressful enough thinking about the fact that the fate of Hyrule lay on his shoulders. He was just a kid. He didn't know if he could do what needed to be done. He wanted to talk about anything else with Saria. As he sat on the tree stump like he had for so many times, so many unseen years ago, he wanted to feel the way he did before the great Deku Tree had sent him on his quest. However, as he looked into Saria's curious eyes, he knew that just wasn't possible. Though she looked and acted like the Saria he once knew, there was something different about her, something she was hiding. What had she seen while he was gone? What had it been like when Ganondorf rampaged across Hyrule in his absence? What terrors had ravaged the country, scarring the spirit of his beloved friend? Link took out the Ocarina of Time, gazing into the glimmering blue paint glazing its surface. As much as he didn't want to admit it, he wasn't the same old kid anymore. Just like his body had grown, so had his mind and spirit. He wasn't a simple Kokiri boy. He was the Hylian hero of time. Link? Saria poked his shoulder. Is that the special ocarina you were talking about? Link blinked, forcing a smile as he looked back at Saria. Yup, pretty cool, huh? Saria tapped a finger on her chin, her gaze traveling around the instrument. I guess I should be honored that you kept mine, considering how fancy this thing is, she said. Who gave it to you? Link rubbed a bit of dust off of the ocarina. He wanted to avoid this question too, but he knew Saria wouldn't let him get away with it this time. Princess Zelda gave it to me. She lived in Castletown and wanted me to guard the ocarina so I could open the door to the sacred realm. Princess Zelda gave it to you? I think I've heard of her, Saria said. Yeah, I don't know what happened to her. Last I saw of her, she was escaping the castle on a horse. That's when she threw me the ocarina. Saria was silent. Link guessed that she knew better than to inquire any more on the subject. Hey, want to know something cool? Link asked, nudging Saria with his elbow. What? Saria's voice was tinted with its familiar innocent excitement. Before I came into the temple to rescue you, a Sheikah appeared before me, Link said. Really? Saria's eyes were wide. What did he do? He taught me a song for the ocarina that can warp me back here to this temple at any time. It's called the Minuet of Forest. That's amazing, Saria cried. So if you have to leave, you can just warp back here to see me whenever you want, right? Link grinned. Yeah, want me to teach it to you? Saria nodded, clapping her hands eagerly. Both she and Link put their ocarinas to their lips. Link began to play the haunting waltz-like tune. Saria followed along. The two friends sat together on the tree stump in the middle of the Lost Woods for the first time in ages. The sounds of the forest began to dim, as if every living creature within the woods was listening intently to the melody straining from the small clay instruments. Even the wind seemed to quiet itself. As they finished the last notes of the song, Saria suddenly dropped her ocarina onto the soft grass below, gasping for breath. Link's face paled. Saria? Are you okay? Saria put a hand to her chest, breathing in and out in quick succession. Link wrapped his arm around her shoulders to try to steady her. She fell limply into it. Link, she mumbled. Why didn't you tell me? Saria, please, not now! In a panic, Link used his free arm to pull out a small bottle filled with a red potion from his belt. His fingers fumbled as he tried to open it, but before he could, a blue glow radiated around both him and Saria. Crystallized structures formed around them, spinning rapidly. Please, stay with me just a little longer, Link moaned, hugging Saria tightly. Saria had awoken as a sage. The world went black. Link opened his eyes to find himself standing in the middle of the Chamber of Sages. The symbol of the Triforce was underneath him, and before him was a green platform with the symbol of the Forest Sage. Saria appeared on the platform, her face somber. She glanced at Link before looking downward, averting her gaze. Thank you. Because of you, I could awaken as a sage, she said quietly. Link was silent, a lump forming in his throat. I am Saria, the sage of the Forest Temple. Saria looked back at Link. Her eyes were moist, the blue light that permeated the Chamber of Sages reflecting off of them beautifully. I always believed that you would come, because I know you, Saria said, trying to keep her voice steady. Link reached a hand forward. Saria, Saria shook her head. No, you don't have to explain it to me. because it is destiny that you and I can't live in the same world. A tear escaped from Saria's eye, slipping down her cheek and dripping onto the platform below. I will stay here as the forest sage and help you. Now please, take this medallion. Saria rose her hands above her head, closing her eyes in concentration. The chamber seemed to hum with magical power. Link looked up to see a green medallion lowering from the heavens into his hands. It was the forest medallion. Saria was adding her power to his, which increased his strength in his quest to defeat Ganondorf. Link looked up as the world around him began to fade away into empty whiteness. He rushed forwards towards Saria.
No! Saria, don't! Please don't leave me!
Link screamed. Saria gave a sad smile before she and the chamber faded away, leaving only the ghostly white of nothingness.
Please don't leave me alone,
Link whispered as he began to break down in tears, covering his face in his hands. The last tendrils of Saria's voice drifted into his ears. Saria will always be your friend.